Introduction. Don't really have one, but my name is Tian, and this is going to be the first episode of About Life. What this podcast is going to be about is mainly life experiences. But the first part of this series is going to involve the way that I see the world. Um, and after a certain point, where this channel it's going to grow into is to have others people experience that are similar or different or if I went through an experience and somebody else related to that, I would love to have that a part of the podcast. And if not, different life experiences it's is going to be featured on this channel. So, uh, introduction. Um, what we will be talking about. Okay, done with the introduction. First time doing this, have no idea where it's gonna go, but that's what the podcast will be about. A little bit about myself before we go into the topics that we're talking about. I'm Tian, just an average guy. Don't have much to do, which is why I'm creating this podcast. And I decided that I don't know what to do, so creating this podcast is kind of like a journey for me to that document my life. I'm starting off with not knowing what to do and feeling lost in life for the past couple of years or early in college, not knowing what to do. Went through college. Let's backtrack just a little bit even further. I moved to the United States at the age of 15, and I I went to start as a sophomore, graduated high school, and went straight into college, not knowing what to do. Um, so I kind of just took classes just for the sake of taking classes and not really knowing which direction I want to go. So I ended up getting a degree in communication, and I graduated just a couple months ago, and I have a lot of free time in my hand. And I guess I ran into the dilemma of not knowing what to do. Every day I would try to try something new, wonder what should I do, what should I do, and just get lost in the whole process and kind of have a mental breakdown because I didn't know what to do. So this is kind of like my beginning of doing something. And I always read books about people say the hardest part about doing something is just to do it. And this is me doing it, and this is me starting something from scratch. And to prove that everything takes time, and a couple of years later, we will look back to this point, knowing that this is the very first point and very first podcast and beginning of something that will grow into I don't know what, but I just know that time and just if you keep doing something, you will get good at it. So this is the first example. But with that being said, let's move right into what we will be talking about today. So the topic for today is going to be about emotions and how I've dealt with emotions and uh, what my journey with emotions is so far. So I hear the term emotions a lot, but I never knew like when you hear the term emotions, like what is emotion? Like we think about sad, anger, happy, excited, and all these things, but being happy, like you can't really pinpoint what happy is. Either you are or you're not. Or if you're angry, you can maybe that's a little bit easier. Like I'm mad, but emotions is a little bit kind of tricky for me, especially because I guess I didn't know how to kind of deal with emotions when it comes to anger, sad, happy, excited. I just kind of was kind of like all over the place most of the time, and I guess a lot of times, like let's say like something pleasant happens, it kind of feels good and kind of just goes over my head. I don't really think about it. Um, so like experiences that happens to me, I don't sit down and think like, wow, that was extremely happy. I was super happy about that, or I was extremely sad about that. I don't pinpoint words to my experiences. It's kind of experience what you experience. Um, so it's kind of difficult to kind of deal with emotions when it comes to verbally and how to process it. Um, and I always like to look at things from how and why that works and how they work the way that it works. Um, so speaking of emotions and how I've dealt with emotions, let's say like whenever I get mad, I would be mad about a situation and I would just keep thinking about that scenario. Let's say like my mom called me and I get irritated because she did something in the past, right? And I would think about that. And after the phone call ends, I would still be bothered by the phone call after the phone call ends. And I will sit there and think about it and I'd be mad. And I would play a scenario like after the phone call ends. I would um, play her as she would talk to me, and I would say things as if I was her, and I will say things back. So I have this argument back and forth, and that's kind of like a television show that's happening inside of my head. Like I would play the scenario multiple times, and it will take hours and hours before I snap out of it. Most of the time, I'm 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 stuck in those moments a lot of times, and not until recently, I've been kind of on this journey on kind of like self development when it comes to meditating and being more present and be more aware of the now. Um, and I came across Dan Harris the other day, and he was talking about how he dealt with the voices inside of his head. And what he said was kind of interesting. He said, um, whenever an emotion comes up, uh, instead of suppressing it, acknowledge the voices, and acknowledge that the voices is there, and introduce them to the whole scene. So when I heard that, I was thinking like that kind of reminded me of Split for a second, because I had a moment where I was in the shower and I was just being with myself and the voice in my head, and all of a sudden I asked myself, "Who is this?" And that made me freeze for a second. Like I got chills down my spine because I was thinking about the movie Split. I saw that not too long ago before that moment happened, and I was thinking, man, am I having multiple personality disorder right now? Like, am I like who am I talking to? Like, why is it like there's just me, but the voice is more than me? So why is it that I'm talking to myself as if I'm not myself? So this whole journey began, I would say maybe like 5 months ago, and that happened, and I was so scared of that moment when that happened that I just kind of put it aside. I did not acknowledge that moment at all. Like I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not gonna be I'm not gonna have multiple personalities. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not gonna go there. So when Dan Harris said this, I was like, wait, what? So you assign each emotion with a name, and the way that he said it was like, if you're mad, introduce the mad person. Let's call him X to the stage and say, what are you mad about? So he would say, "Hey X, come to the stage, and why are you mad?" So I did that. I tried that the other day, and a lot of times I would have voices in my head, and I would suppress the voice so much to the point where it just get louder and louder and louder, and it would numb me to the point where that's all I think about throughout the entire day. But this time, I had a scenario played in my head. I was worried about I can't remember exactly what, but I was driving and I was worried, and I gave the name Worry with Corey because that kind of rhymes. So I was like, "Hey Corey, welcome to the stage. What are you worried about?" And I was just driving and driving, and nothing happened. The voice was just clear. Like I couldn't think of what I was worried about. And the more I start to acknowledge these emotions, the more that the voices disappeared. So that was kind of the one thing that I found really strange. And not that there's different voices in my head. And I came to a theory like, what if these voices is like the past emotions that's not been processed? Like, not like a no, like just what if scenario, right? Like, there's suppressed memories that's been happening that's a part of us that is still attached to those memories. So we have the voices is kind of like a video clip that's not been fully finished yet. It's not been fully like looked through. It's not been fully acknowledged. It's like this little kid that doesn't get attention. So it keeps knocking on the door until they get the attention. So I gave the voices the attention that they needed, and the voice disappeared. And I'm just gonna go a little bit deeper into how bad this was before I gave attention to my voices. Like I've been suffering for like depression, I guess you could say that. And this voice is in my head, and this has been numbing me for so long. Like I would wake up, and something happened the day before, would hold me in bed for hours and hours and hours, and I would fight distractions like videos on YouTube and keep surfing the web just to get away from the voice, just to get away. Now that I look back at it, I can see it, like what's been happening. And the more I try to get away, the more you suppress it, the more you try to hold the water down. At some point, the water the water hose would expand, and at one point it would explode. And that would happen to me. I would suppress my emotions so much to the point where I want like there's no way out for my emotion. I didn't talk to people. I just kind of dealt with all the things inside of my head. I would play the scenario in my head. I would say, what if this? Why didn't I do that? I should have done that. I should have done this. I should have done that. So I played the scenario in my head for so long until I gave the voice acknowledgement that it needed, which was kind of interesting. It's kind of scary to think about that you give yourself multiple names and personalities. Like I would call my mad voice Mad Max. And every time I'm get mad at something, instead of saying like, "Oh, I'm so mad," or I'm mad about, let's say like my mom didn't invite me over for dinner. Bad example, but to the point. Like I would get mad about that, and I would just dwell on that point throughout the entire day. And the entire day, I would think about why she didn't invite me. All the possible scenarios, just like Doctor Strange. He sits there and calculates all the million possible ways that why my mom didn't invite me over. But we all know that I'm not Doctor Strange. That sounds so weird. Doctor Strange. I'm not Doctor Strange. And no matter how many times I calculate a decision or a reason, it will never come to a pleasing factor. I guess I will never come to a point where I'm satisfied. So acknowledging these voices and give it a name, like it's still me, right? So it's still me, but the voice is kind of like this. Let me give you a scenario. So I'll be worried about no, my mind is just empty right now. Let's say I'm worried. I'm worried about let's say like an interview. Classic example, right? Worried about interview. No, actually, I have another example. I was mad about something that happened to me. I was really mad. No, I actually take that back. Okay, there's two strikes. Okay, strike number 3 is not gonna happen, right? Strike number 3, no, number 2. What happened was I was really afraid because I confessed someone, and I fought for my justice, and I stood up for myself. So I was really scared to kind of just confess the person. And when I did that, I felt like this extreme fear inside of me. I was like, what if this? What if that? Oh, no, I need this. And this kind of my job kind of depends on this. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid. I told myself, I was like, Tian, I got you. Trust me, I got you. Don't worry. I got you. Don't be afraid. If you're afraid, just feel this for now. But just know that I'm here for you. Just trust me. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And I stood there and I felt it. I felt the fear. I felt it for a good 3-4 seconds. And it all went away. After that, I was like, you know what? My life does not depend on this job, and I can care less if anything else happens. So I fought for myself, and I stood up for myself, and I felt really good. Because a lot of times I don't think I value myself, or in general, I don't think we value ourselves enough, where we would stand up for ourselves, fight for ourselves. I mean, some people do, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times I feel like we don't do that. And that's a little bit off topic, but anyways, going back to the voices. So I felt the fear, and I sat there and I acknowledged the fear. and I felt it, and I gave it a name. Like I know the person that I want to be, and that's the person that I am. If there's any voices that goes outside of that person, that is not me. That is just like a childish me that could be like dwelling on like things that are unfair or life is unfair, or kind of like the silly small things I've been worried about. Like that's things that's not me. Like I'm better than that. So anything that goes outside of the lines of like not being that, then that's not me. Emotions are just emotions, but like I know who I am and I know who I want to be, and that's the person that I am, and that's the person that I chose to be. It kind of rhymes a little bit, but um, so yeah, that before I felt like I was trying to merge everything into one me, I guess. But I guess that dealing with emotions in a little bit different way has helped me tremendously to live, I guess, be more control of myself. Before I felt like I was not in control of myself, because if I had a thought, that thought would run me over. It would run me over to my bare bones. And it's so numbing, and it's so hard to go throughout the day like that. And I lived like that for years and years, ever since college started. And it's so hard to just kind of like experience the things in everyday life when I have that voice. So my way of dealing with it is through acknowledging each emotion, well, with a name, and just give it the attention that it needs. If I'm mad or sad, no matter what, it doesn't matter. If I'm sad about something really silly, give it attention and see why I was mad about that, or sad about that, or happy about that. Like, what makes me happy? What makes me sad? See, even right now, what makes me happy is really a hard question to answer. Maybe some other people have is easy for them, but for me, it's kind of hard to say. It's like, what makes you happy? I don't know. I guess like things happen, and some things makes me happy. Other times it doesn't make me happy. But I know for sure certain things doesn't make me happy. So I guess that's a good start. But that will sum up the first episode of About Life. And just a little recap of what we kind of talked about in this podcast is emotions, and whether we should suppress or acknowledge the emotions, um, and kind of with the voices in the head and how I dealt with that. Starting with the emotions, um, and obviously acknowledge the voices. What helped me, and last but not least is the voices. I give it a name. Give it a name, introduce it to the stage, and that helped me out a lot. But if you guys had any similar experiences, if you guys like the video, or feel you guys are connected to this piece, feel free to comment or send me an email, and I would love to have other pieces also included in the podcast, like life experiences about something that you came through and how you dealt with that, and maybe you don't know how to deal with it. I would love to sit down and kind of talk about how to deal with certain things and what could work and what couldn't work. So, with that being said, first episode is now over.